Here comes. And so Ned is not joining us, I understand. He just sent an email that he had some urgent family business to take care of.
I missed it. Who is?
Ned
Will not be joining us.
will not be joining us, no.
Okay. Just before I went to your link, it appeared that Ned had sent some emails. Was that what that was about?
That's what it was about, yeah.
Got it.
Yeah. So how has your week been?
Good. Kaiser, God bless them, did their follow-up on my PSA. And I just got the results this morning, 0.1 on tracking. So that's about as low as you can go, like limbo.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Well, my latest one was 0.05. And then the little marker that
You win.
less than.
You win. Speaking of winning, last night's football game was a very tense finish. It was 30-29. Washington beat New York Giants.
Okay.
And it was a last-second field goal and fun to watch. I'm getting ready to go to my Palm Desert project with that condo. And so I did not watch with any family, but sat down here in Irvine and had a good time watching.
Well, your weather in Palm Desert is certainly going to be different from Irvine.
Yeah, it was 103 yesterday.
Yeah. George Farrick is coming in.
Wise man from the north.
The wise man from the north.
Can you hear us, George?
There he is. Hello,
Wise
George.
man from the north.
You unmute yourself, George. There you
Did
go.
you say wise ass from the north?
Yes.
Well, if the shoe fits.
Yes. Tom, I really enjoyed viewing that 9-minute video you did on the cross.
As
thank you.
did I.
Yeah, I was very impressed that you could, the words and the music and the images, it was really amazing. Yeah, very impactful.
Yeah, thank you.
Was the feedback from the original homily what motivated you to create the recording?
Well, no. The original had several incarnations. One of which was I had written that poem as kind of a conceptual sketch for a series of photographs that I wanted to take to make up the Stations of the Cross.
Yeah.
And then I did that, and it got very rejected by the nuns who were in charge of St. Mary's Medical Center at that time. So I had these photographs and thought, well, why don't I send them, make copies and send them around a little bit? And it actually did get published in the mid-'80s by St. Anthony Messenger.
Oh.
Was that before the music was incorporated?
Yeah.
And so I had, and I, once I started going online and doing that kind of stuff, and started doing a little bit of video editing, And I used an old, I mean, this was probably, I don't know when I did that video, 2007, 2008, something like that. And one of the very popular classical records from several years earlier was that Goretsky Symphony No. 3, the Symphony of Sorrowful Songs, which is still quite popular in classical circles. And that middle movement just seemed to have the right atmosphere, and it was the right length. So I simply put that on as the background movement. Within minutes of my putting it up on YouTube, I get a notification of a copyright violation.
Oh,
But they said, don't, you don't have to do anything about this, because basically the owner of the copyright will exercise their privilege to add advertising. So if other people look at that, I don't know, when you watched it, did you, was there any advertising preceding it, or did any advertising interrupt it?
I have to plead ignorance. I don't recall one way or the other.
Well, you
Yeah,
would have
I don't-
recalled it had. So, and I was very careful to put all of the details of the recording in the notes. So if anybody wanted to buy that recording, so, basically what I was doing, they were allowing me to use it and I was giving them free advertising, which is what a lot of copyright holders do. Disney doesn't. Disney will tell you to take it down or will sue you. But most others, like Warner Brothers or Sony, will let you, even without permission, they'll let you use it as long as you give them, as long as they reserve the right to throw in their own advertising or to profit from whatever other advertising there is. Because one of the things that Google makes its money off of is by placing third-party ads in people's content. So, for all I know, Google might interrupt it with an ad for a pornographic website. Or as
So have you heard from Crook?
haven't. I haven't at all, and there's nothing. There's no new email from him, so.
Well, while we wait, you've probably seen my interaction with Phil Berryman and Bernie Brakel with regard to abortion.
I don't think so. I don't recall getting it. Was that within the last day or two?
Right, yesterday and this morning. But if you don't receive it, I'll forward. But I'm almost sure your name was on that long list of seminary people that involve Ralph Platts and Bernie Brakel, Phil Berryman.
Yeah, there was
Juan
one.
Romero.
There was one that came from you that apparently involved them, but it didn't have their number, their email addresses. It was just the 5 of us.
Ah.
So what are they saying about abortion, and what are you saying about abortion?
Well, the more conservative, which would be plants, Welsh and Brakel, consider the moment of conception that any termination is a mortal sin and should be forbidden. What
Here comes.
Phil Berryman and I posited was that there may be first trimester or 6 weeks, something of that, where it would not be considered an abortion, but a termination of pregnancy.
Mhm. You know,
Hello, George.
hello, George.
Hey, Tom, how are you?
I'm good.
John, how are you?
Well,
I am well, thank you.
We're all good.
We're
Um,
getting your chest and the bottom of your face.
Let me.
Now we've got, that's a good framing, yes.
All right.
There I am in all my glory.
Hi, George.
In all his glory, as
Yeah.
is George Farrick too.
Ned is not gonna be with us today.
Right. I got that.
Okay, he's running around doing stuff.
Oh.
Well, George, what's the haps?
What's that?
I said, you look like a Revolutionary War British general in that red outfit.
Well, I tried to put 'em on. That's true. Well, you're kind of wearing something similar. I mean, we could be compatriots there.
Yeah, it's a polo shirt.
Yeah, yours is not quite so bright. Yeah,
Yeah.
I chose something more Hawaiian.
yeah. So you must be in a relaxed mood.
And this is the first flannel shirt that I've worn since early summer. Or since last spring. It's a little bit chilly down here at the beach this morning.
Aha.
It was a little chilly here.
Welcome
this morning.
change.
Yeah, well, it's never, we haven't had any really hot weather down here in Redondo since probably back in July.
Well, that's a good place to be living. You've got your natural air conditioning.
You're smarter
Yeah.
than you look, Tom.
It's a very good place. I am, well, I don't know about that.
I don't know where I got that, but I love the phrase.
I'll have to do an analysis of that as it pertains to Tom. I mean, whatever it means generally, and then however.
Well, there is the cartoon that features the wise ass on the hill.
I've never seen it.
It's one of the cartoons in the LA Times. I think it might be Pearls Before Swine or one of those.
I saw a good cartoon. It shows, maybe some of you saw it. It's a Bizarro cartoon.
Yeah,
I'll show it to you. I'll see if I can pull it up here. Here it is. Can you see that?
it's out of focus.
Can't quite read it. It's fuzzy.
Okay. It says, it shows people walking their dogs and two dogs talking to each other. It says, these walks are much more pleasant since they started muzzling people.
That's a keeper.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so I'll send it. By the way, on a little note, I talked to somebody who's good friends with John Swanson. Do you know John Swanson,
Yeah,
the artist?
the artist, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he's done some things that are in the cathedral, and he does these art pieces. Anyway, he was in the last parish I was in, Immaculate Heart in Hollywood. So I got to know him there, and he, over the years, I've acquired some of his works.
Mhm.
And anyway, I guess he's in hospice. I don't know if he's at St. John of God or where he's residing, but I guess he's not doing well, so he may not be doing much more artwork.
Yeah, that's what I heard, that he really is pretty much at death's door. I think it's congestive heart failure.
Yes, yeah, that's what I heard. Yeah.
Yeah, so,
I have two of his paintings
Ah,
here in this very room.
really? What are
Yeah.
they? Which one?
One is, well, when I finish eating, I'll stand up and show them to you.
Okay,
Yeah, I'm just crazy about the guy.
yeah.
Uh, and the last painting I got, I went over to his house to pick it up, and he was lending me books, and it was just a wonderful host. And,
How long ago, George? How long ago?
Oh, gosh. I'm gonna guess wildly 10 years.
Was he in his small house over in Hollywood area? Or had he moved?
I don't remember where it was, but I don't think it was in Hollywood, but I'm not sure.
Okay, yeah,
It was a small house, though.
yeah, yeah, I think it's over towards Silver Lake in that area, yeah.
Mhm. I just don't remember.
Okay,
Um,
yeah, anyway. Yeah, he has, I guess his mother was Mexican, is that correct, or?
that I have an impression he's half Mexican.
Yeah, half Mexican, yeah.
At the Eucharistic Congress, when he sets up his booth,
Uh-huh.
he has, for the last X years, he's had a lot of help from nieces and nephews. And I think they look Hispanic.
Uh-huh.
And I had the impression they were going to take over the business when he falters, which,
I see, uh-huh.
And live off the sales for a while.
Yeah, kind of the reproductions and cards and so forth, yeah. Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, he gave me kind of an initial kind of pre-final version of his Good Samaritan, which I like very much. It was like in 3 frames, and I had that for many years, and then I gave it away to somebody I thought could enjoy it. But
All
yeah.
3 pieces together?
Yeah, kind of a triptych. Yeah, side by side. Yeah, if you go to his website, John, you can probably, I think it lists his works, and you can click on them and pull them up. Another one I like is a fisherman. It shows the fish. They're out there fishing and a big catch of fish. Yeah, there's they're practically all biblical themes of one sort or another.
Mhm.
And some of them, he works all kinds of little scenes along the edges, so you get like the whole history of biblical. Yeah, they're very intricate. And if you go to his website, you'll get some history and so forth. And
Well, if you don't mind, George, Eric, tell us a bit about his life history.
well, I don't know that much. All I know is that he started doing this artwork, and that's been his whole life, I think, has been, yeah. He's a very, I think, spiritual person. He's a very politically progressive in a certain sense. He did posters, anti-capital punishment posters, and he's for the working person. I think he
I
comes
think
from
he was
the,
very active with Pax Christi.
yeah, different things like the farm workers and all those types of movements for the nitty-gritty person, you might say.
He's got a lot of work that look like lefty propaganda art of the 1930s, are kind of reminiscent of that look to
Yeah, right, yeah.
me, which, happens to be a look I like, but, consciously proletarian.
Yes, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I received in the mail a few years ago some posters. I forget what they were for. a series of, kind of like what you're referring to, George. There was something on the ballot, there was something we were voting for of that sort, and they were all, maybe it was about capital punishment, but it could have been about something else. But it was kind of like what you're talking about.
Did he have interaction with Mahoney? I'm guessing that he did in the
No.
planning of the cathedral and such.
Well, I don't know if he had anything with regards to the planning, but there, at one point, I did go through the cathedral once and I saw he has a wonderful work of art that's like a procession.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
Procession.
can visualize it.
Yeah, there's a couple of them. One is where people are holding candles, many people, and then there's another one where there's a procession with, I think, a monstrance or something, kind of a, and I think one of those is in the cathedral, one of the little wings or chaplets there. And I think the Vatican has his works, some of them, they're in various museums and so forth. And anyway,
He's not a Catholic. I don't know what he is.
oh, he's not a Catholic. I didn't know that.
Yeah, well, my brother-in-law told me that because I bought one of his pictures to give to him.
Yeah.
And we were talking about him, and I said, "You're kidding, you know? He sure seems to have a grip on Catholic theology."
Yeah.
You know,
and
Well,
that's
that's a
a
good
major
question.
association.
Yeah. Well,
How many times did you give him communion, George?
no, no. Well, I never saw him in church, so he could be a non-church going Catholic, Catholic in spirit.
Well,
Yeah.
according to my brother-in-law, he was just certain, you know. It was like, don't argue with me. I know what I'm talking about, which is not his usual style. But
Well, I would take that as hearsay evidence at this point.
well, definitionally, it is. Yeah.
I know Richard Montes, CR classmate or a year ahead of us.
No, he was our classmate.
Yeah. So anyway, so he's a big collector of John Swanson. And,
Oh, I didn't know that.
yeah. Yeah. I remember going to, when Richard and his wife lived in Alhambra, I went and visited them, and he had all kinds of artwork on the walls. And I just assumed that he was, just from having a
Yeah.
Mexican mother and a whatever, and all of his sensitivities. But he could be maybe a nun. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe your brother-in-law had some discussion with John Swanson where they had an argument about something.
Well, that's what I gathered.
Could be,
You know?
could be, yeah, could be.
Well, anyway, let's see. Let me show
He
you
did
the
study
two paintings.
with Corita Kent.
Yeah,
What did you say, Tom, about?
He
Kent?
studied with Corita.
oh, he did.
Oh, is that,
Yeah.
he did, huh?
Yeah.
Well,
Well,
Corita,
let me,
was Corita Kent Catholic?
well, some would say.
I think they went into the universal atmosphere. They went beyond Catholicism into mysticism, you might say, where the institutional, it's kind of like going up in the Challenger, the space thing, and you need those rockets to get up off the ground. And then once you're out there, you drop the rockets and you're propelling off on your own. So
Oh, the boosters.
yeah, the boosters. That's what churches are supposed to be, boosters.
Well put. Well put.
I'm not sure what I think on that.
Anyway, George, show us those those
Yeah.
artworks. you have. Yeah.
Okay. Let's see here. Okay, can you see
Yep,
that?
Oh, yeah.
I don't know how good the
that's
light is.
Daniel in the Lion's Den.
Yeah. I can't see the picture at all. I can't, how,
Yeah, you
That's a
got
good
it.
look, though, George. That's good.
yeah, and notice, if you're unfamiliar with the picture, the little angels that are staying the lions, holding them back.
Yeah.
And there's the king up looking into the lion's den on the left. And I don't know who those guys are on the right. Are they the three young men? But that's a different chapter.
But it's still the book of
Oh.
Daniel.
Daniel, it says out of the three guys, Daniel answered, my God sent his angels who sealed the lion's jaws. They did me no harm. I was found innocent. Well, that's cool. Okay, and now here's the other one. Hang on.
By the way, while George is doing that, let me share the screen of the image.
Oh, there we go. That's a good look.
Yeah.
Yeah, good deal.
Thank you, Tom. That's great. Yeah.
Yeah, look, and the king looking in, and
I was getting dizzy traveling with
Yeah.
Crook.
Tom, can you find the Good Samaritan too?
Many have said that, John.
probably, let me,
Okay. Now, can you guys see this next picture?
let me
Yeah,
get
once,
out of screen sharing. Okay,
and Tom, could you look up the Good Samaritan
okay,
and share
I'll try
that
to.
after George gets, okay.
George, something's blocking most of the picture.
Oh, how's that?
Oh, much better.
There you go.
Yeah.
Andale, good.
Yeah, this is Isaiah, chapter 9, chapter 10. The lion, to me it is anyway, the lion shall lie down with the kid, I guess, and the bear and the whatever, and the child shall play over the serpent's nest. I think that's what this is. Here's the
Yeah.
serpent's nest.
Yeah.
The Messianic age.
Yeah, peace seems to be a big theme.
Yeah,
Yeah. But
Communal peace.
Tom's version will be much better, obvious, better, more easily seen.
yeah, I
Yeah.
just have to
Came
find
through
it.
much better on yours, George.
Than on Tom's?
Much better than your first one.
It's probably the way the light is in the room here.
Wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, I don't know. But I love
Yeah.
Swanson. If I had more wall space, man, my house would be festooned with his stuff.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Let's see, which one were you after, the Good Samaritan? There we go.
Yeah, the Good Samaritan, yeah.
Okay, let's see if I can get that up here. Screen share. There we go. So it's kind of a triptych.
Yeah. Yeah, I like the one I had a lot better. It didn't have all these bright colors in it. It was like like a preparatory draft, you might say.
Ah,
And it had some very slight colors. It was more black and white, but it had more seriousness to it. Yeah.
uh-huh. And the prodigal son. Is a good one.
Yeah. You know what?
It's a good one for you, Crook.
it certainly is.
That's your next one.
Yeah. if-
Well, no, I've been served notice by my spouse that I'm done.
Oh,
Yeah.
Um,
No more
can't
verse
even-
reading.
we don't even have enough space for me to hang a picture of FDR. I
Well,
mean,
Oh,
you know,
not even a
First-
4x6.
impossible.
yeah.
I can't believe that's
and
true.
First time, well, I can't either, but you know,
Well, yeah, you should have FDR and Joe Biden kind of in a next to each other.
oh, I don't know about Joe,
No,
George.
no, it's aspirational. It's aspirational, George.
I see, okay.
Aspirational, yeah.
By the way, the,
You know,
but-
I'm so pissed at Biden, or that's too strong. I'm annoyed. When he started talking about a third vaccine, you know, booster shot, I found out one of my brothers-in-law had already had it. And I said, well, how'd you do that? He said, I just called CVS.
Yeah,
And I said, well, that's strange. And so Betty and I have had the booster shot for probably a month.
oh,
And you know, and I read some column last week early in the week that was saying, you know, and these jerks that got in line and got their booster shots and were greedy pigs, and you know, it's not even clear that it's going to be authorized. And who do these people think they are? You know,
Well, they-
Karens and Kens and all
just
that.
ignore those people, George.
Well,
Ignore
here I
those
am.
voices.
Here I am reeking of privilege.
Well, you know, some of these shots, if they're not used, they go to waste too. You know, so that's another avenue. I mean, but speaking of, you mentioned FDR. Did you see the PBS series Atlantic Crossing?
I saw about half of the episodes. Yeah.
You didn't, was that accurate portrayal? Was he really, and you know, did he really have the fondness for the Norwegian princess?
Well, yes. Now, how deep it was, I don't know.
Right, yeah.
I mean, FDR was a notorious flirt,
Yeah.
and loved female companionship, and especially adoring female companionship,
Yeah.
which he did not get from Eleanor.
Yes, right.
But did for many, and apparently Princess Martha was one of them. Now, you know, how much of a bond was there and all that, I don't know.
Yeah, okay.
You
Anyway,
know.
it was a very interesting story. Yeah.
Yeah, it was. And she came out, I thought, really cool. The
Yeah,
way it depicted her, you know, her character, her personality.
right.
And her husband too,
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
her
it was-
father-in-law.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
know.
I recently found out that Norway is a country of, guess how many people?
About 4 million.
Yeah, 4 or 5 million, 5 million now.
Tiny. Wow.
But they were very significant, you know, in their own eyes there in Europe, not wanting to be taken over by the Nazis.
I have an acquaintance verging on friendship who's Norwegian. She's a counselor, psychologist for especially kids with autism. And she was born after the war, I think. But she, you know, her parents were very involved and in the resistance and all that. And you know, the Nazis raided their home and found nothing, but, you know, were there looking. And her father is a non-believer who wound up as minister of religion in Norway, and who told her his strategy for weakening the churches was to not let the churches build their own churches or finance them, which would, you know, cause people to go out and work to raise the money and bond people to the church. draw the next generation, but they just give them government grants to build.
Uh-huh. Yeah,
You know,
that's interesting.
Devious,
huh?
devious.
Yep. Well, and apparently everything she says about her parents, they were just splendid fellows, you know,
Yeah.
very deeply humanistic, but secular and et cetera, you
Kind
know.
of like the atheist chaplain at Harvard.
Mate, yep, reminds me of that as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
I still think it's a contradiction in terms, but
Well, speaking of that, I have a little list of things I wanted to bring up based on your last discussion. One is following up on Joseph Bracken, but also Bishop Spong died this last week. Bishop John Shelby Spong. He was an Episcopal bishop.
Right.
I read his book, one of his books.
Yeah, recently I checked out 2 books from the library. One was Unbelievable. That was his last book. And the other one was Liberating the Gospels. I think it was another book, and both very interesting. Kathy Ryan, whom we had on as guest,
Right.
was reading those and recommended them to me. So I checked them out, and I didn't read them cover to cover, but I read the introductions and, went through the chapters and read a few of them. But, and then I found out that there's a website called Progressing Spirit of Progressive Christians. I guess there's actually, if you Google progressive Christianity, there is actually some kind of fellowship or connection among people like Bishop Spong and others. That's interesting. So I signed up as a subscriber to their website. For $3 a month, you can, the $3 kind of finances keeping the thing up, but you get a roster of who the people are that Bishop Spong felt worthy of appearing on the website. Kind of he vetted the people. But there's a very diverse group. It's worth taking a look. Matthew Fox is among them, but some Episcopalian priests, but women and women of color, and they have little biographies of each one. So if you want, I could send you that link. But anyway, Bishop Spong.
Please do. I'd like to say.
Yeah.
Died,
I'll
he was
take a look, sure. Put it up.
Okay.
Herbert knew him, of course. He said that Spong was an accountant by training, and he emerged into the Episcopal hierarchy because he was able to do some real financial wizardry to save the finances of an Episcopal diocese in New Jersey.
Oh, okay.
I don't remember which diocese.
Well, he did become a bishop of a diocese in New Jersey.
Oh, did he? Okay.
Yeah. So maybe he took it over and saved it. Yeah.
Yeah. But I don't know. George, you'll disagree with me, but I thought he was just a blithering idiot.
Well,
Spong.
if you read the introduction to this book on, I don't know if it's called Liberating the Gospels, it's very impressive. Just the introduction, he talks about finding out about a Scottish biblical scholar named Calder, Coulder. It's just just the introduction itself is fascinating, but he's not just an empty-headed blowhard, as I thought too. I really hadn't paid much attention to him. But when I got these, recommendations from Kathy Ryan that she was reading them, I thought I'd check them out from the library. And he has chapters about eternal life, and he has, I think he doesn't believe in miracles, et cetera, and a lot of things. But he comes across in the end as a very affirmative believer in Christ and a Christian.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
My take on it, it's been, oh gosh, at least 10, maybe 15 to 20 years since I read it. But he came across to me as a very good guy, you know, on a personal level, just a wonderful human being.
Yeah.
But you know, I mean, as far as I would not call him a classical Christian.
No, he isn't. Yeah, he's
Yeah,
not
at
a
all.
classical Christian. Yeah. No,
Yeah,
How
I
about
mean, he
Irv
doesn't-
Ryan's take on him?
blithering idiot. That's, I mean, Herbert would never call anybody that, but he thought his theology was naive.
well, I've
Naive.
got to mention that when I was in Rome, I came across J.A.T. Robinson's Honest to God. Robinson was a British Anglican bishop who wrote this book called Honest to God that was kind of a bestseller at that
Yeah.
time. And for some reason in Rome, I came by, you know, for some reason I had my antennae out to these types of things, kind of wanting to find out what they were saying. And Honest to God was one of the mentors for Bishop Spong. And the only thing I can remember from Honest to God that Robinson was saying, God is not out there. You know how people picture God the Father up in heaven someplace, seated on a throne? So he was saying, hey, it ain't that way. You know, there's other metaphors that you can use for God. And it seems like that's happening nowadays with God being more here and now and present close to us, you know, not far off, you know.
Yeah, Richard Rohr, a big
Yeah.
example.
I
Sure.
was about to say
Yeah.
that comes through so powerfully on the daily reflections from Rohr.
Right. Yeah.
But Spong, to me, I mean, more of a Unitarian Universalist type than an Episcopalian.
No, he wouldn't agree with that. No, he comes across as very much of a Christian. And he says so. It's, you know, it's worth getting the book from the library and reading the last chapter of it. You know, I may even, I copied some of the pages from the book before I took it back to the library, but I'll see if I have those and I'll read some of the statements in our next conversation.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah.
And we promise not to turn you in as
Okay.
a
Yeah,
copyright violator.
I don't want to be burned at the stake at my age. I can't stand such heat. Although in the old days, they thought that was a way of saving the person's soul. Let's burn their body so that they'll, at the end, say, become saved, right? That was.
Some did. I'm not
Yeah.
sure all would have subscribed. Tom Welbers, can we put the ball back in your court, at least to look at possible guests and where we stand with that?
Not too deeply, because I'm, you know, as I mentioned, I'm trying to get a hold of Joe Bracken, and you know, he's
Who's our
91 or
prime-
92 now.
Uh-huh.
But apparently from that piece that George Farrick shared with us, you know, he is still active. His last book was written only 3 years ago,
Yeah.
published only 3 years ago. And I'm not too sure, you know, who else to, as people come to my mind, I may pass them by the rest of you, or whatever. But I think as people come to your mind too, especially if any of you are in touch with them, that would be, you know, pass it by.
George Crook, you have strong feeling about Tim Elmy as a
Oh.
candidate.
Oh, yeah, I do. I really do. And I'll tell you why. John, when you unearthed him several months ago, he texted me and left me a message, a very warm message. And he remembered my mom's hamburgers and my love of FDR, and I forget what else he said. But so I called him, and we must have talked for 2 or 3 hours.
Whoa.
And I was just so impressed with the guy. John, did you, when I remember Tim, I remember sort of a brash personality, irreverent and sarcastic, and
Yes.
all that. And during our conversation, I was just over and over again impressed with what sounded to me like deep humility that he was just from his conversation, Did you get that impression, John?
I got that impression when he was a guest at Shavira's. You remember a few years
Yes.
back?
Yes, I do. I remember it very, very strongly. And I always had a soft spot for him. I stayed over at his house some weekend or two, and he had a brother named Terry, and I don't remember his sister's name. And I liked Mr. and Mrs. Almy a great deal. So, but he's a far more traditional Catholic than any of the four of us, probably even more so than Ned. It's just a delightful conversation. He's very, very embedded in the church. He's living in Asheville, North Carolina, which has anybody ever been there?
Nope.
No.
No. Oh, it's a terrific place. It's if you're going south on the Blue Ridge Mountain Parkway, which starts in Virginia on the West Virginia border. And it was built by the WPA, and it goes through Virginia, West Virginia, and then North Carolina, Tennessee. Those states abutting one another. And Asheville's at the very end of the thing. It drops you off, the Parkway does in Asheville. And we had gone down that highway to check out the fall colors, which were utterly spectacular, a number of years ago, in 1991. So anyway, Tim lives there, and he's active in his parish. And everybody he knows is a Trump supporter. And Tim is Tim despises Trump, but he takes it with great good humor. I think including the parish priest is, if I remember correctly, overtly a Trumpian. And Tim, I don't know, just the nostalgia of talking to the guy, plus his humility and warmth, just so impressed me.
Did you get any feedback, George, on where his wife is in that practice of the faith?
No, I didn't. She came up, but no, we didn't talk about her, faith. I think she may have converted to Catholicism, but I'm not sure. But Tim's Catholicism, I mean, this ain't Fred Lawrence when it comes to talking theology and stuff, you know, but then neither are we.
Well, that's for sure.
Tom, John, the other thing I felt very strongly about is I'm all for inviting Gary Lombardi, you know, whom I have not seen since the funeral of Al Crowell's son.
Oh, that's way back.
Yeah, that would have been maybe in the 80s, maybe in the 70s. I don't know. I thought Gary preached a great homily at the funeral. And it was the first time I ever heard about the low Christology, because he mentioned something about Jesus must have been terrified as he was facing his death. And I said, what? He can't say that. I was out of the church at the time, but anyway, the reason I said if we have Gary, we got to have Paul Dodson, of whom I guess I'm the only fan. But if because Paul would hear about it if we have Gary, and if we don't invite him, for sure his feelings would be hurt. And who wants to do that, you know?
Well, I can certainly see that and would endorse that. I'll tell you this, it's now 8 years, I think, ago when I was at the Napa Institute and I spent time with Gary Lombardi, Joe Alzugare, and Dave Shaw.
Oh, that must be great fun.
What a great time it was. And of course, Shaw has passed away and Alzugare has, but my sense, a little bit like what you said about Almy, there's a humility I picked up with Lombardi there that I had never seen before. And I found that very magnetic, if you don't mind I just enjoyed my time with him as well as Alzugare and Shaw.
Yeah, well, I think Gary, once he, where was he? What's the name of that town where Mr.
Petaluma. Petaluma.
No, I'm thinking where Al
Healdsburg?
settled.
Oh.
No, it's where this boy toy of Pat Siemens was stationed, and where
In Santa Rosa, St. Eugene's was a cathedral there, and Gary was there for a while.
I'm thinking of this is the place I'm thinking of is a smallish down on Highway 101, and it's not Ukiah, I think it.
Yeah.
That's where the nun, you know, blew the whistle on Siemens spending and all that, I believe. Well, at some point, Gary was the pastor there, I think. But anyway, my guess ever since that funeral is that Gary became a very charismatic Catholic priest. You know, I don't mean charismatic movement. I just mean personality.
Right.
Yeah. Wouldn't you say, Naj?
I would say so. And I think both Alzugare and Shaw commented on what a great preacher Lombardi was.
Yeah, he sure impressed me. The one sermon I heard, you know, it was just pitch perfect for I don't remember anything he said except Jesus must have been scared. But it was just very good.
Tom Welbers, do you have contact information for Lombardi?
I am not sure. I think I could probably get it if I don't, but
George Crook, do you have an idea who's the one who should reach out if in fact we do that?
You?
I don't know how to get the information. I can pass it on. I think you just contact St. Vincent's Church in Petaluma, where he resigned as pastor, and I think he lives there in Petaluma someplace.
I do have a personal address for him, Gary Lombardi at me.com. Which may or may not
I-
be current.
I think I have a cell phone.
So,
John,
Yeah, I have a cell phone plus Gary Lombardi at me.com.
yeah. I only have.
Yeah, so I have a mobile number for him.
well, you're the last guy that dealt with him, am I right?
I
Most
guess,
Yeah.
yeah.
You know, why not, John, if you would contact him, since you were the last one. I have been out of touch for many years, although when was it? 4 years ago or so, Paul Dotson had a gathering for our 50th belated,
Ordinandi,
pardon me?
the ordained.
Yeah, 50th anniversary of ordination. I think it was about a year later. And Gary was there, as was Norm Supanchek and a few others. And that was, you know, we weren't there terribly long, but you know, you may have had the better contact with him. I would be willing also if you liked. I'd be willing to contact Paul Dotson too. I don't know if we would want to invite the two of them to come on, or
Oh, I would suggest that we follow George Crook's idea, and that is that Lombardi be first, and then
Yeah.
weave the conversation in.
Yeah.
And then for him, I would guess to endorse us to reach out for Paul Dotson after.
okay,
George Crook, I did leave a message for Jerry Angrisani.
Oh, good.
Not as an invitation, just as a Johnny checking in, which I do. And he hasn't responded, but Angrisani made it very clear, my last couple of contacts, that he's a very private person and prefers not to go to reunions or would not consider himself. Now, I'd be surprised if the subject comes up, but I really would be surprised if he said yes to an invitation. And I mean, he is a daily communicant, very conservative in almost every way, I think.
I'm sure he does. I talked to him at Jabro's funeral, and he didn't seem to have much interest in coming down here.
Yes.
But I had the impression that if I blew through Shasta or wherever he is, he would receive me.
Oh, I'm certain that's true. Yeah.
But yeah, I picked up the lifestyle conservatism.
And just not a high profile personality at this time in his life.
Yeah.
Yeah, I personally would not be interested in a conversation myself for the reasons you're talking about, and because, I wouldn't know what the purpose would be.
Yeah.
But I mean, you may have more purpose than I do, because I've been out of LA and I was disconnected there.
well,
During those
one
Rome-
question that I would have with any of these is what exactly would be the purpose of inviting any one of these as our guests? I can think of a couple of possible purposes, but for the most,
Now, George Crook, you outlined
Yeah.
to me the perfect reason for Tim Almy, and that is we of our Zoom group are really curious and fascinated by spiritual journeys, our own spiritual journeys, and if you'd care to share with us. Does that resonate, George Crook?
Yeah, sure. And I guess the essence, the essence of George's critique of Angrisani is, doesn't sound like a journey to me. Sounds like he's still where he
Stuck in-
always.
Stuck in place.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it
yeah.
sounds like one of those one of those streets that says no exit. I wouldn't go down that one.
Although,
But-
do we know that? You know, could he
we do.
perhaps have gone through a journey of
Yeah,
agnosticism
sure.
or something like that and come
Yeah.
back to this? I don't know.
Perhaps Saint Teresa of Lisieux is his favorite saint, and we could connect on that level.
Well-
Well, maybe you could.
She's one of mine too.
Yeah,
Gosh, I just don't get that, Broad. I mean, I just don't. But I haven't taken a shot in 30 years, maybe today. I mean, my spiritual journey is kind of largely a circle, I mean, back to the church.
well, yeah, it'd be kind of interesting if each of us took 5 minutes at the beginning of the session just to say, okay, here's a capsule of each of our journeys, and then the guest, then kind of took their time, and then we went off from there. I mean, that's one way of doing it, but
That's a very welcoming kind of approach. And
Sure.
I would second that.
Well, it kind of
But-
seems to me that maybe, if we were to adopt that kind of approach, and I'm seeing it now as, much more viable than anything that I'd thought of a few minutes ago. But sounds like either Gary Lombardi or Tim Almy, which neither of whom I've been in much contact with. Almy not at all, Gary just sort of on the periphery a couple of times. But Gary might be a good one to start with that.
Yeah, and Gary is, wherever he stands on stuff, he's very articulate and garrulous and, enjoys talking and, et cetera. I mean, we won't be bored.
He was the director of continuing formation of clergy, I think, at one time in Santa Rosa.
Wouldn't be surprised. I didn't pick that up
In fact,
when I was there. but-
that's one of the points where I think he and I may have crossed paths many, many years ago.
Ah.
Where he was doing that, but
Now,
Oh.
coming from another angle, I put out the name of Katie Dawson. And Katie Dawson is the lay director of faith formation for the Diocese of Orange and has impressed me greatly. And she's at the heart of bringing the Called and Gifted program into all religious education leaders. I don't know if that's outside the purview of what you'd like to see, but that's a person who I think would be worth a 30-minute guest spot at some point.
Oh, why not? George?
well,
yeah, and I go back to what Tom was saying. I don't, a part of me is a ADD personality. In other words, I can be too curious and my energy can go off in different directions. And I'm kind of trying to concentrate my energy more these days and not, not go off as much, kind of focus on what my priorities are. So while it would be of interest to me, I probably would say, well, I'll pass on that one, if it's of interest. In other words, it's too too specific to Orange County and Catholicism, and for me to be, for my mind to go off and put a piece of energy into that.
Got it.
I mean, it could be, I could go away saying, wow, gee, that's wonderful, but I'm just trying to weigh what I give my attention to, I guess. That's,
Well, now let me see if I can make a contrary pitch.
sure.
This, one of the things that I'm fascinated by is the tremendous exodus from the church in this country.
Yeah.
You know, and just how do you form faith? What works, what doesn't? And, you know, like I was talking to my pastor, and he talked about we've lost a generation, at least one. And who's going to maintain the, you know, what's a Catholic parish, specifically, you know, Incarnation and Glendale, going to be like in 30 years? I mean, who are the congregants going to be? And how active a parish will it be? You know, well, who's going to put up the flowers for, you know, Holy Week and stuff? I mean, in other words, how bad is this mass? I'm going to use the term mass apostasy. I don't know if that's quite correct,
Well-
but mass flight.
Well, have you experienced it? Have you been at parties where you start talking to somebody and then they turn out to be an ex-Catholic?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's happened to me too, to the point where I was thinking of writing a book. I mean, this title may not, called How to Be a Good Ex-Catholic. And then I bumped into one that said, George, you don't need to, people have it figured out what they're doing. You know, I thought I would have like 12 topics. You know, what's the essence of baptism, you know, that you're chosen. Well, you're chosen, but it's a symbol that everybody is chosen and loved. You know, go through all the hot button issues and what's the crux of it, you know, the mystical body of Christ, that we're all kind of, there's a common good. So what about confession? Well, it's the idea of being reflective about your life, you know, instead of just going through it willy-nilly. In other words, people that, you know, and then there's the Catholics that just go a few times a year. You know, I have my grandkids that were baptized 10 minutes away from where I live here, but one went to Marquette and loved some of the sermons, but she's not a practicing Catholic. You know, neither of my grandkids are, and but I'm sure they would check off Catholic on the box, or they may go to some Catholic ceremonies. But you know, there's a lot of people who are marginal Catholics. You know, they have their own. Tom, you probably know more about this too from your position. And you know, I was there for 8 years, but I just think people mature. You know, they say, well, wait a minute, if I don't go to mass on a Sunday because I'm doing something else, is that like a mortal sin? Am I really going to go to hell for that? It seems like there's a certain maturity that people go through psychologically that puts them at odds with some Catholic teachings that they grew up with. You know, is there a big difference between killing somebody and eating meat on Friday, but they were both mortal sins? You know, there's a whole area of theology which is troublesome. So a lot of people say, screw it. You know, I'm just going to use my common sense judgment, try to be a decent person. And, but hey, I'm rid of all this stuff, you know, that makes me feel guilty about 101 things, you know, so.
Well,
So-
one of the things that I've reflected on is just exactly how big is that tent that we call Catholic community. Now, I hate the expression. I loathe the expression, Catholicism.
Yeah, yeah,
Because that reduces everything that it means to be a disciple of Christ into an ideology.
Yeah,
Anything that ends in ism is an ideology.
yeah,
It certainly has those connotations, and I would
Well,
I would just as soon
of
avoid
course,
that
I
term
can see that, of course, you know,
and find
And-
in a sense more meaningful terms than that word or an ism word. And how big then is the tent that we would identify with those who in some way or other are adhering to, let's say, Catholic elements, at least of Catholic tradition,
yeah.
or elements of Catholic identity, and yet having difficulties with certain other elements of it.
Right. Tom, let me toss this out there. Do you recall, the four of you, the term refuseniks?
Vaguely, yeah.
It goes back to
To
the
the
Soviet Union.
draft, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, I use that term in an article I wrote about children of divorce. I wrote an article which was a mistake because I never cited. It had to do with children who did not want to visit one parent or the other.
Hmm.
You know, I'm not going to go to mom's house. I'm not going to go to dad's house because of umpteen. So I called them refuseniks of divorce. So I did a mini research on families like that and children and so forth. But because the word, it didn't have some fancy academic title like alienation, and, you know, there's a lot of literature about that. And it's kind of Gary Neer's book is all about that. You know, I just got that in the mail, John. So,
I'm watching my mailbox as of yesterday, not yet.
but I describe myself as a refusenik from Catholicism. I'm like a person that left the Soviet Union because I did not like the Soviet government, but I'm Russian in literature, culture, values, and instincts.
Mhm.
So I've got Catholic culture, I've got roots, but I just, where I was, and it's just a person's particular journey, that I was at the point where I kind of what you're saying, Tom, there's things that were kind of, in other words, some things you can marginalize, but for example, if you want to get married, then you know, I parted ways for multiple reasons. But many people could, you know, I could have stayed in too, but there are certain reasons that you can't, you know, it just doesn't work out. So,
Yeah.
so there's kind of degrees of, and you know, Episcopalianism, they're kind of like cousins. They're kind of like cousins. A lot of Episcopalianism is based on the Benedictine rule, I found out. So, in the whole liturgy, you could walk into an Episcopal church by mistake and think you're in a Catholic church, you know, to hear the liturgy, and vice versa, probably. But
except where it's different, it's more literate.
yeah, the sermon might be better in the Episcopal church, and it might be given by a woman, a lesbian woman. Yeah.
To link George Farrick back to what Tom Welbers was talking about, I found Caltino's book, How Big Is Your God? A very helpful piece in returning Catholics and spouses of Catholic who were going to the RCIA program, and the children of some of these families that the parents were worried about their kids getting off. And it was Baron Caltino's How Big Is Your God? And George, what's the other one? I just drew a blank. East LA Priest to the Gang Kids.
Oh yeah,
Greg Boyle.
Yeah. Those three, to me, were especially helpful. But How Big Is Your God by Caltino I think, was the anchor point in my outreach that way.
Mhm.
And if God is that big, then our faith is going to be that big too, as opposed to small tent Catholicism.
I would think what concerns me is not Friday abstinence or birth control. And, I mean, as soon as the church got rid of the Friday abstinence requirement, what happens to all those people who went to hell because they ate a hot dog at a Dodger game on a Friday, I
Yeah,
mean, do they get sprung? Is there,
or,
it just,
or where they were never there to begin with.
well, of
It's
course,
a construct. It's all a
of
construct.
course they weren't, I mean, it's silly. But that was, American Catholicism
Yeah.
and
Right.
right up to the Vatican Council. Like when we had some Eucharistic Congress here in the 1920s or 30s, Pacelli came as the papal legate to I think it was in Chicago, I'm not sure. And, I mean, that was Catholicism. I mean, remember Mary's Hour at the Coliseum?
Oh,
yeah.
yeah, big time.
Yeah.
And we'd go and sit there, and all these religious orders with their wonderful costumes were down on the field. Is that a Carmelite? No, I think that's an Augustinian. I mean, what the hell? It was cool, actually.
Yeah, well,
But
yeah,
what was it? I mean, it sure didn't withstand. It was not a house on a foundation of rock, was it? When the winds came and all that, it pretty quickly collapsed. But anyway, I'm meandering. But don't we want people? Sure, we want them to be able to think and not be buffaloed into thinking they're going to go to hell if they forgot to make the sign of the cross or something. But shouldn't they be connected to the liturgical life of the church? I mean, don't we want that?
well,
Isn't that
Now,
kind of an irreducible minimum?
but where are the points of connection to the liturgical life of the church?
Showing up, for one thing.
Yeah, but what happens when they show up?
Mm-hmm.
And I can see two things, or not two things, a bunch of things. One of which is, okay, at the heart of our Eucharistic faith is real presence. But if real presence is basically saying you got to believe Jesus is there, and if you don't believe Jesus is there, if you think it's a symbol, to hell with it. You're missing all of the various dimensions and perhaps points of contact with the real presence. If you come to Mass and you experience Jesus on the altar and the hell with everybody else in the church, you're not experiencing the fullness of the real presence.
Well,
if you come to Mass and are experiencing, well, it's a happy clappy gathering of a bunch of people who happen to have this one bond that they are all Catholic, and gee, it's really neat, and we got a real with it groovy priest, and a great rock band is leading us. You're missing another big part of the real presence. So we are not good at exploring, as I think the best of theologians are doing, and I'm looking at people like Lonergan and even Ratzinger and Bracken, all have a very definite Eucharistic dimension to their theology that is not limited to transubstantiation. And that's a real problem that I see with Barron, is that he is basically limiting it. You got to accept transubstantiation or you're wrong. And transubstantiation is simply one way, according to the Aristotelian Thomistic way of viewing reality. It's one way, and an authentic way, of describing the how of the real presence. But it doesn't exhaust the real presence.
You know, Richard Rohr, whom all four of us like, I was reading him this morning, and he says, "Hey, man, I'm there for transubstantiation." I don't know if he used the term, but he buys it. You know, the literal physical presence of Jesus in.
Yeah, but does he exclude people from it who wouldn't necessarily believe the same thing?
Absolutely not.
I'm sure
Yeah.
not. I'm sure not.
Well, and the point is, where does transubstantiation fit into a faith? Because nobody these days understands what substance is. They
Yeah,
don't- they
yeah.
can't
Well, I do.
articulate the difference between substance and excellence. You know,
Yeah,
if you get down to the real isness of something, well, that's a very elusive concept. So,
But
it
you know,
might-
Tom, you sent an email, and I was going to respond to it, and I didn't get around to it, and then the moment had passed, where you said nobody understands, you know, what transubstantiation could mean, and I don't agree with that. I think people get that Jesus is actually present in the host. You know, they may not know how it's so. I would number myself among them. I mean, and maybe the evil of transubstantiation is it just became a, obsession with molecules. I mean, whose molecules are these? Well, actually, they're the bread's molecules, right? But I think the average Catholic understands the literal presence. Or believes in that.
But do they understand with that all of the ramifications of real presence? And part of the ramifications of real presence is how symbolically that real presence is actually shared, communicated, how it actually happens. You know, the essence of the Eucharist is that it is a sacrament, right?
Yes.
The definition of a sacrament is an outward sign, meaning it is a symbol. Now, how is it a symbol? What is it a symbol of? It is a symbol that really is what it signifies, I think we would say, but that doesn't negate its symbolic reality. What it does is use the symbolic reality as the gateway to the whole mystery. And mystery is a synonym for sacrament in much of Christian tradition, especially the Eastern tradition. So,
I finished reading that book of which I sent you guys the review from the New York Review of Books, and I kept waiting to find his explanation of how the Eucharist happens, is confected in the Orthodox Church. Never came across it, very clear. They believe in, I would say they have a literal belief in the Eucharist, but he doesn't get into how it happens.
Yeah. And I think the categories even of literal versus figurative, virtual, symbolic, I don't think those exist in the Eastern mentality. I think they would say, now, wait a minute, literal, when you say literal, you're restricting it too much.
Well, maybe.
Is it real? Yeah. But what do you mean by literal?
One thing that I would used to, when I had, classes for converts and Catholics about that, was to say that, for example, a wedding ring, like George, if you have your wedding ring on, if you took it off and a thief took it, they would be taking something that is metallic. It wouldn't be the same wedding ring that it is to you, because to you it has meaning to you, right?
Mhm.
The reality of that wedding ring has changed and meaning is real, but it's not the same as some molecular moving around type of thing. But the thief has it and goes and pawns it. Somebody else gets it, knocks it down into 1 ounce of gold or something, and it's nothing. But to you, it's irreplaceable. Maybe not irreplaceable, but very special and real. It's not unreal. And so there's a whole dimension of meaning that human beings, what about the Capitol? It's just mortar and bricks. If you take it from a chemical viewpoint, there's a whole ladder of significance, that Fred talked about with Lonergan. There's a chemical, biological, but then at the top, it means something. It has a symbolic meaning. And some people take the symbolic meaning too seriously. Somebody will say something about the Quran or burn the Quran, and then Muslims will go and destroy their whole family for doing that, instead of saying, hey, that was just a book. Don't get so upset about it. Well, so meaning to me, when you begin to think about it, we live our life according to meanings. Some people will say a curse. And if a person's a Buddhist and say, well, I'm detached from that, so I'm not going to do anything. But if you say the wrong kind of curse towards somebody, they could kill you, right? The Sunnis and the Shiites or whatever. So, we live a lot off of meaning, and meaning is real, and meaning has a lot of consequences. So I don't know if this has anything to do with it at all, but I think we can't give meaning, say, well, yeah, meaning is not significant. The meaning creates reality. A lot of it, when you think about it.
Mhm.
Yeah,
This is a mystery, isn't it? It's like, I think the word symbol, even the way Tom's using it, I think it gets in the way of really analyzing or understanding the Eucharist. Because I think a lot of people, if you say symbol, they hear not real, and that's not what you mean at all.
yeah, and
Not real.
but there isn't a good synonym for it. That's the problem.
Yeah, I'm
There
thinking.
isn't a good synonym for it, so you have to start with, and I kind of go back to, at the time, George Ferrick, you were in Rome. I think one of the professors at the Greg was David Power. Does that name ring a bell?
Yeah, I never had him. Yeah, he may have been there, but I do recall his name. Yeah.
He developed, I think, at least he was one of those. I attended a class of his when I was there, audited it, and was very impressed, and also read at least one of his books back then, and I'd love to get back into it. But he's the one who opened the door to me and explored the way that a symbol functions, because it's not just a sign that points to something, but rather it is an invitation into further exploration of the reality that is symbolized. And that made a great deal of sense to me. Similar to the idea of mystery. It's not something that you can't know, or you can only know a little bit about, or whatever. But a mystery is an invitation to explore more and more deeply a reality that never ends.
Yeah, I have a Rome classmate. His name is Joe Martos.
Yeah.
Have you come across him?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. His book, I was very impressed when I read some of the obituary writings about.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that he was as broadly, how would I say, competent.
Yes.
as
Yeah.
he
Yeah.
was.
Yeah.
But,
So he wrote a lot about the sacraments, and I think
but Doors to the Sacred, that captures it. Doors to the Sacred.
Yeah, and he's really critical of the word receiving communion. If anything, the way I've come to see it is that instead of us receiving communion, God is receiving us into God's self.
Yeah. So that
we're taken up into God's life. The reason why I go to communion is because I want to be bigger than I am. My little ego isn't the last word about who I want to be. I want to be taken up into a greater life. And so we receive communion. We receive Jesus to live the life of Jesus when we walk out the door.
Yeah. Part of the problem is that receiving communion, and the even worse expression of it, which of course the Anglicans tend to like, taking communion.
Yeah. Taking communion, yeah.
That is all a sort of a one-sided commodification of the sacrament.
Exactly.
Here is a real problem that a lot of the apologetics, like Baron, don't really address, that we have commodified these things. The whole business of the politicization of the Eucharist, refusing somebody communion is sort of like refusing a commodity.
Yeah.
And the more, what we do have to realize is that when we're talking about communion, we are talking about a word that the root of it is union. And the com is an intensification of that union. So to a great extent, we are responding in sharing in communion. We are responding to God's passion to share communion with us.
Well, and isn't it important to remember the context of the meal, that if Jesus were around today, would he say, Joe Biden, yeah, come in, and you over there, transvestite, queer, drag queen, come on in you're welcome here at this, to have some food and drink, is that?
Well, but what would be interesting, and I very much agree, he would say, come on in. And then I think he would also say, I am sharing in every aspect of your life. So
I'm with you.
Let's join hands. I want to be with you. I am with you. I want you to be with me. Now, in the light of this love, let's take a look at your life, and let's take a look at my life. And how are they one? And, my life, I'm Jesus speaking, my life is one with your life because of the cross. Because in the cross, I partook, I tasted everything that it means to be human, including the ugliness of it. And so let's walk hand in hand and explore what reality is for us. Let me invite you into reality. I'm sort of grasping at words here, but I think the meaning behind them is kind of important.
Yeah, I'm going to send you what you're saying is, it gets back to Joe Bracken. I went to Joe Bracken in Christogenesis, and I went to Christogenesis, and I came across Jillian Langford, who's a volunteer. She's a theology student at Villanova,
Yeah.
and she has an article that I read about energetic centers. I mean, it sounds kind of weird, but Tom, what you're saying is that the energetic center of Christ will meet the energetic center of the whoever it is,
Yeah.
and that they're becoming intertwined,
Yeah.
intermingling. This is kind of the quantum physics view instead of Aristotelian Thomistic philosophy being applied to understanding theology and faith, that there's an interactive thing taking place,
Mhm.
right? Isn't that what you're saying?
Yeah, precisely. I don't like the energetic centers or centers of energy or all of that.
Right, yeah,
That all sounds a little too new agey to me.
yeah.
I think that what is being expressed by it is very, and I guess I would use the expression personalist.
Well, this, yeah, go ahead, because, I was thinking of the example of spiritual direction, which you've all mentioned, that spiritual direction, isn't it like, the Jesuit that came into your life, George, and, that something, what did he bring that met what you brought that was transformative, and what does a teacher bring that is transformative when you're in a class of somebody who's kind of extraordinary, or what did the father bring to the prodigal son? What kind of energy did that father bring to the son when the son said, "Oh, let me just come in and be your servant. I don't deserve any more." And the father brought a different kind of energy, or different type of aura, a vibe. I don't know. Yeah, it's tough to find words that haven't been used.
There's a word that we haven't used yet that I think, boy, you just touched upon something, George. What is one of the most important words for Jesuits by which they identify themselves?
Meant for others?
Companions.
Sure.
Companion. They call themselves the company of Jesus.
Compañeros.
Compañeros. And,
The company of
companions
Jesus.
are those that share bread together.
Mhm.
And I think one of the insights there is that companionship is the beginning and the fullness of expression of relationship. That whatever sharing bread together means and leads to, that is the heart of the relationship that we are invited to in Christ Jesus, with him and one another.
I'm going to interrupt for a second because I have a sense that even before companionship is trust. And, I spent 20 plus years in the sales business, and without trust, there's no curiosity and investigation together. And if there's one thing as a messenger and looking to be a companion, it's how do we establish trust? And once the trust is there, then the companionship leads toward curiosity, investigation, willingness to change, and conversion of the heart.
Or is it a two-way street? A two-way street in which sharing bread together also becomes the road to trust.
Good point.
Yeah.
If there's somebody, I just don't trust you. And then suddenly I get an invitation to join you for coffee and donuts or something. You know, some kind of situation where we're on, maybe on neutral ground, but sharing bread in some way is an important part of that. And by your reaching out to me, I can learn to trust you. And then sharing bread, being companions can be a much more, it can develop from there.
Well put. I agree.
There's a two-way, one of the other things that was really formative in my early life as in
Hey,
liturgy
can I
was
call you back in
was a
about,
word by, work, a small book.
can I call you back in about 15 minutes?
Gabe Huck, who was head of the liturgy training program in Chicago. But he wrote a small book called Liturgy Needs Community Needs Liturgy. And that, of course, can go on and on. Liturgy needs community, needs liturgy, needs community, needs liturgy, needs community. Each one is giving birth to the other. And that's a real, I think that's, you can see that in a lot of things. And I would often say, you want good liturgy in a parish, work on what the quality of a community that you have. And what is that parish doing? How is that parish believing? How are the members of the parish relating to one another and relating outside? You want good community, celebrate good liturgy. And keeping that mutual relationship in mind keeps you from getting into a linear, dualistic, either or a linear, this causes that one-way street mentality.
I would give you a classic illustration at St. John Newman Parish, because the physical layout is such that after Mass, high percentage of folks come into the patio right next to the church and either have coffee and donuts or sit together and talk and visit, or go into the parish library, which is right next to the patio, or on 2 or 3 Sundays out of the month, go into the parish hall for something hosted by the women's ministry, the Knights of Columbus, and so on. So that the being fed at the liturgy leads toward more community after.
Yeah,
Wouldn't it be great? Wouldn't it be great if somebody, it doesn't have to be the priest, but somebody within that dynamic group that meets in one way or another after liturgy were to say, from this, we need to go out to that homeless camp and see what they need. We need to go from here to this hospital or convalescent home and see what they need. And, broadening that sense of community to be inclusive of those that need to be brought into communion with that community. Otherwise, it becomes kind of closed off, doesn't it?
But
yeah,
Tom, you have triggered another reason why this called and gifted program is so close to my heart.
Right.
Because not everybody has the charism to go out and do that. But if we've created a language within our community that those have certain charisms to do that kind of work, and others different charisms, but each of us will be fed in our spiritual journey by learning to do something with the charisms.
But you're never doing it alone. You're never doing it
Yes.
alone.
Yes.
So, you might have the charism to go out to, let's say, be present to a homeless person or a homeless community. But hand in hand with that will be the invitation. Hey, Joe, why don't you join me tomorrow and see, in other words, it's got to grow.
And if Joe has the charism of evangelizing and you have the charism of healing, you've got a language that talks about how you work together in that visit to the homeless.
Mhm, precisely. So anyway, yeah, what I'm so much opposed to is seeing the Eucharist just as the nourishment for your, going out from the Eucharist and living a Christian life. Because that's sort
Yeah,
of simply a cause and effect.
it shouldn't be an ATM for sanctifying grace.
Right. Right.
And what if you forget your password?
Then you're,
Then you go to hell.
that's right.
Mortal
Oh,
sin is forgetting.
Good one,
the password.
George.
Yeah,
Anyway, that's sort of where my own Eucharistic theology takes me, where I think, I won't say my own, I think the authentic Eucharistic theology of some of the better theologians, including the crowd like Richard Rohr and his friend Ilya Delio. And Ilya, I see, is one of Joe Bracken's good friends.
yeah.
That's
All-
interesting.
They're all, and Bracken a number of times does, bring Lonergan into his into
Oh, does
his-
he?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
At least,
Yeah.
at least from the index and the table of contents. I haven't read it fully.
Whoops, I just got a message on my computer that the battery is running low.
Oh dear. And George Crook looks like something is happening in his life.
Is there an earthquake?
Maybe it's
That's-
time to log off.
I can't figure out this cut and pick an iPad. So is the
Oh,
problem.
you're trying to do a both and. with
Yeah,
us.
so-
And I realized I haven't had it plugged in for the entire time we've been on.
Yeah,
And I'm about out of power.
yeah, me too. So
Yeah.
if I disappear, I want to say goodbye now, but I'll hang in there.
How about Eucharistic sharing of the energy, the grace to go forward?
Well, how about one aspect of that Eucharistic sharing? John, why don't you go ahead and get in touch with Gary Lombardi?
I will.
And invite them, and let's go one by one here and see what happens.
I'll keep you posted in the next couple days how that goes.
Just one quick thing. We've forgotten about John Moretta. And George, I think you would find him interesting.
Yeah, well, John Moretta and I and my brothers, we went off to Trappist Monastery in Vina together. Because in the tidings, there was an ad that they needed help picking prunes or plums, during the harvest season up in Vina. So we all piled in a car and we went to Vina, and only to find out it was an unauthorized ad placed by an over-enthusiastic monk.
Oh, no.
Yeah, but we were there in Vina and John Moretta was there, and so we had that little escapade together. Yeah, I think I would enjoy John Moretta. Yeah, because I grew up a little bit over in Boyle Heights. When I was a kid, I went to the first grade at St. Mary's. Which
Oh,
is
I didn't know that, George.
Oh yeah, yeah. over in Boyle Heights, yeah. So I have that experience, and then when I was at All Saints in Pasadena, there's a former nun who became an Episcopal priest. Her name is Alice Callahan.
I know her.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, do you know her? Yeah. So we're friends with her, and she helped me get one of my first jobs because she was hanging out at All Saints in Pasadena also. She has this Las Familias del Pueblo, right, George?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. So my wife used to go out with Alice. They were looking for a mariachi group so that these two women would go into these bars in East LA looking for mariachi groups. Yeah. Yeah. So she's a great person. Yeah.
She is indeed. She was either an Episcopalian priest or gonna be one
No,
or
she is
something.
ordained. Yeah,
Yeah.
but she's not into the liturgy. You know, she's like a worker priest, so to speak.
Yeah,
You know, her
I
ministry.
always, when I
Yeah.
see her, I always say Father Callahan. And she,
Well, I don't know
she
if she would
never,
like that.
she's never quite cracked up, put it that way.
Yeah. No, but she's wonderful. Yeah, we continue to support her financially all through these years.
Yeah,
Yeah.
boy, is it a small world.
It is, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah,
But
she is, her place, John, that he's describing is, call it a settlement house down in the Garment District on Skid
Right.
Row. And Alice is full of rage at the injustices of things, you
yeah,
know?
yeah, yeah.
She's,
And she's such a little petite fireball, right?
oh,
Just
yeah,
and but she's so genuine, and she's been doing this all of her life. That's where she's been, and she helps immigrant families that end up in Skid Row kind of get resettled, right, in better neighborhoods and schools. And next time I go down there, I really want to visit her, see what's going on.
yeah, if you want somebody to tag along, I wouldn't mind at all.
Yeah.
Long story. I mean, there's more there about my relationship with her, such as it is.
Okay. Yeah, I'd love to hear about it. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think the point is that God's movement does not totally flow through the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church is part of a large part of God's movement, but at least this is where I come, you know, just because of people like Alice Callahan, you know, looking at her as a former Catholic does not explain the fact that she's she's kind of an evolving Catholic, you might say, you know, and they evolve, and some people evolve beyond the doors. Whoops, sorry, go.
Whoops. Did we just?
Ferric just ran out of
Yeah, I think so.
power.
Well, how about starting with Lombardi and see where that goes?
Yes.
Will do.
Since he seems.
I am
he seems to be
deputized.
the one we all sort of agree on as a possible first step. And then maybe go from there to Elmy? I don't know. Or from there to George's iPhone entered the waiting room. So now he's,
Oh, you switched. Hi, George.
I'm back.
you're back, George. Okay.
The iPhone.
I just experienced the death and resurrection, and it was all because of my iPhone. Yeah, my iPhone.
Well,
I'm back on iPhone.
You know, talking about Alice, let me tell a quick Father Ryan story. Ned one day went into the Episcopal Church, which is diagonal to St. Vincent's, you know, the
Oh, yeah.
anti-Doty monument down there.
Right.
And as he tells the story, here was this female priest. So they started talking, and she said, well, I used to be a Catholic. And Ned says, oh, or, whatever you would say. And I was a nun, in fact. Oh, really? Yeah. And I just felt so called to the priesthood and so called to the priesthood. And I had this Jesuit spiritual director, and I told him, Father, I'm sorry, this is just ridiculous. This is the most idiotic rule of all time, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And he said, sister, you're right. What you need to do is leave the Catholic Church and join the Episcopal Church so that you can fulfill your vocation, which is obvious and real. And Ned said, really? Who was that Jesuit? Well, guess who?
Herbert
Welcome,
Ryan.
Herbert Ryan.
There you go. Yeah.
Tom, Joe, Father Joe Bracken, he looks a lot more well-fed in the pictures that I see that he did when I met him. Do you think he's put on weight, or do I just misremember him?
I don't know. I don't know what vintage those pictures are. I am sure that at 91, he doesn't quite look like that picture in the article.
Yeah, and for all we know, he's got Alzheimer's and, et
That's
cetera.
right. Yeah, he could. Yeah, we don't know. But at least in 2019, it sounds like he was logging on and doing stuff, right?
Yeah,
Tom,
yeah,
if you read that article, yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm pretty sure that he's mentally alert, and I would imagine physically may look a little bit more like a 91-year-old.
Yeah.
Then again,
Yeah, Mark.
I could find out the answer to that by calling Father Rausch, probably.
Sure. Yeah.
And Rausch, incidentally, is a prospective guest.
yeah, and I know him from way back pretty well too. His parents were in St. Charles. And I knew his parents the time that I was in residence there in the late.
So let me tell you something that fits in here. Do any of you know about this website called the New Ways Ministry?
No,
New Ways Ministry.
Yeah, isn't
It's
that Janine Gramick and
It could be, yeah, but it's all about Catholics who are LGBT
right,
wanting,
right.
and I came across it because when I went to Christogenesis, Ilia Delio's website that Bracken was affiliated with, there was a young woman there, Jillian Langford, and it talked about her being a graduate theology student at Villanova. So I Googled her name, and I came up with an article that she wrote, which I'll send you a quote of. But then I went to New Ways, and one of the featured articles is why I left, why I stayed, why I am. Different articles that people have submitted about their spiritual journey.
Mhm.
And the article that's posted right now says, I am and I stayed because of nuns and Jesuits. That's the first line of this person's
one George
article.
Crook and George
Yeah.
Perrick together.
Yeah, that's
Well
right.
done.
Yeah,
Yes. So
On that
I'll
happy
send you the
note,
link. Yeah. Okay.
at 12 exactly.
right.
Okay.
God bless.
Great.
God
Yes,
bless
God
See you
you
bless.
all.
around.
I'm
It's been
Yeah.
great, and you recorded.
Yeah,
Right.
we've had a spiritual Eucharist here.
We have indeed. And ite missa est.
Yes.